Okay, so what I'd like to talk to you about this afternoon, let me get my timer started here, is a citizen science crowdsourced data project approach to utilizing the information that's being accumulated through citizen science projects. Okay. Josh advised us to start out with trying to give a broad overview of our lab's research activities. And so I thought one simple way to do that was just list the field studies and the locations for those field studies by my graduate students over the past 30 years. There's a number of other graduate students that have done different types of projects, so they don't have field locations for their projects. But this shows most of those dots are the locations for the graduate students' field research, and then some of the other dots are from projects that we've done either with a variety of agencies or with industry like Idaho Power and Potlatch Timber Company. But this has allowed us to gather a lot of information about the ecology of amphibians and reptiles throughout the northern Intermountain West. Okay, there's 5 key projects that I can identify that multiple students were involved in, and that at least for the first 3 there provided much of the funding to our lab over the last 3 years. For 17 years, we did population monitoring on snakes funded by the Department of Energy out at the Idaho National Laboratory, and that's one of the largest snake monitoring studies that has taken place in this country. We also were very fortunate to work with the USGS on their gap analysis program and help develop the spatial distribution models for this conservation planning program. And then starting in 1992 and continuing until now, we've been involved to varying degrees with the Greater Yellowstone amphibian monitoring. And after about 8 years, the Park Service and the USGS picked that up, and it's now one of the longest running amphibian monitoring programs in the country. And that's the amphibian part of that is headed up by Andy Ray, a former Ph.D. student from our department. In 2005, the state began developing state wildlife action plans for all the vertebrate species and some plant and animal invertebrate species as well. And they are required to evaluate the status and trends for those species. And we've helped with the amphibians and reptiles on that beginning in 2005 and still continuing with that. And one of the major goals of our lab is to provide them with information on status and trends of amphibians and reptiles in Idaho. And then starting 5 years ago, we began getting involved with community science or crowdsourced data citizen science project. For the spatial distribution modeling, it turns out that it's not so much the statistical approach or the GIS modeling you use, that you can do that in a variety of ways. The limiting factor is just the quality and the amount of data that you have. And looking back over 25 years worth of data, we could see that we still didn't have an adequate amount of information to drive the models the way we wanted to. So with the help of the MILES, the NSF EPSCoR MILES project, we started a citizen science project to try to address that data data need. So Dan Giltz and I started this in 2016, so it's a little over 4 years ago. And this is a citizen science project that uses the iNaturalist app, which is sponsored by the California Academy of Science and National Geographic. And in that time, we've accumulated over 3,500 observations of amphibians and reptiles in Idaho, of 38 species, and almost 700 people have contributed to that. And when Dan was working on his master's thesis, he saw that the georeferenced, for the state wildlife database, the majority of georeferenced observations that they have for reptiles for the state comes from, or came from this, this project. And so this has been a relatively successful project. Another thing too is that, particularly now that I'll be retiring within the next year, this is the kind of project I can keep on working and it doesn't require grant money, and which is very important to me. Okay, there are a lot of iNaturalist observations for Idaho. There's even more citizen science data for birds. There's millions of observations in eBird. But for iNaturalist, there's over about 100,000 observations of almost 6,000 species. But much of these data are really not being utilized or by the different organizations managing these lands. And so we're trying to come up with some ways that we can link up these observations to these different management organizations. So one of the ideas we've come up with is what we're calling the iNaturalist Natural Area Project. And it starts with selecting a natural area of interest. And in this case, I've chosen the Edson-Fichter Nature Area. This is an Idaho Fish and Game land property that's here in southeast Idaho, provides fishing, hiking, animal or wildlife watching opportunities. It's managed by a former graduate student in our department, Maria Pascharetti, and she, we collaborated with her on this project. So you set up an iNaturalist project. An iNaturalist is a mobile app, typically mobile app for using your cell phone to get photographs and GPS coordinates for natural history observations in the field. And then you upload those. Those go, to the database at California Academy of Science. You can create a project that harvests those data. We use their interface on their website to filter the observations so we get the ones that we want. And then we download those into an Excel spreadsheet, and then we sort it out taxonomically. And then the big stumbling block or big challenge here is confirming the identifications or providing them. And that's where most of the time goes, is to check those identifications, quality control them. Once that's done, then we summarize the data, both taxonomically, when they occur by month and by year, and also look for spatial patterns in the information. And then the idea is to prepare a report for that management organization. Now, we don't see ourselves getting in the business of providing reports for all of these natural areas on an annual basis, but this is sort of a proof of concept, demonstrate to them that the data are out there and can be used. We have an advantage here, being part of a biology department and associated with the Natural History Museum, of having the expertise available to confirm these identifications. And there are a number of you in the audience that I've hit up for, or we've hit up for help with identification. Okay, so this slide shows the some ongoing or planned natural area projects. I've mentioned this one. Katie England is the undergraduate student who has done this project and the work on that. We're also very interested in Cherry Springs. Eric Rude, who's a former graduate student from our department, excellent high school biology teacher. He runs 2 BioBlitzes a year out at Cherry Springs with his advanced biology classes from Pocatello High School. And that's resulted in, I think, the highest density of iNaturalist observations for any area in the state. He's got over 4,000 observations there. We're collaborating with Zoo Idaho, particularly their wetland exhibit, to see what wildlife are using the new wetland they've created. Kenny Long has been studying the herps out at the Blackfoot River Wildlife Management Area, and he is has put together a project for all the species out there. Julie Meredith has been working on observations from Castle Rock State Park. We're particularly interested in that because it's part of the state park system, and they have undergone a 15-year project where they do 2 state parks per year trying to inventory what they have and involving the public. And so we think that that would be a good thing. Another one that would be that we're particularly interested in is working with Sagebrush Steppe Land Trust using iNaturalist to help document the biodiversity on the areas that they're seeking to conserve. I'd like to point out too that this has been made possible by career path internships from the biology department and from the Idaho Museum of Natural History. And then we also received a small grant from the Center for Ecological Research and Education to fund a couple students to work on this. So one of the nice things here is that we can continue to work on this, and about the only funding it really requires is the funding to pay for the to try to pay for the time for the students. Okay, so thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.